Welcome to the Returnee Report. On this show, we share the stories of African diaspora who returned to the continent. I'm your host, Akaliza Keza, and this is a message from home. You can find the Returnee Report on many of your favorite platforms. You can also follow us on social media at Returnee Report. That's at RETURNEE Report. Alright, let's get on with the show. In today's episode, we hear from Moyoni, a young singer and songwriter from Burundi, who recently moved to Rwanda after 10 years in Canada. If you're interested in hearing her beautiful music, I've included links in the show notes. Let's listen to her story.
I was born in Burundi and I left when I was 14. I went to Canada for 10 years. And then when it was time to come back, things were a little too difficult in Burundi and unsafe as they are even now. And so the return for me was in Rwanda. But as much as I thought I knew Rwanda, I had only been here for a few months at a time, and it was sort of a first time. It was the first time for me, being here and living here. So I would say that it was sort of a. It was good to be back on the continent. But it was kind of painful and hard to think, I cannot be back in my country of origin. Even though I consider now Rwanda my home, it still isn't where I grew up.
I have a few questions that I'm asking all the guests this season. And the first one is, do you consider yourself an African? And in your opinion, what qualifies someone, or rather, what identifies someone as an African?
Do I consider myself an African? I would say yes. What identifies a person as an African, the first thing that comes to my mind is a longing to be home. The reason I say this is I started identifying myself as an African the moment that I left the continent. When you are all the same, or most of you are the same, you don't really think of a sense of identity because everybody shares the same identity. And when I went to Canada, I actually went to a very nice high school. And we had many events. It was called multicultural events, where teachers would ask us to talk about our country, make a food from our country, wear traditional clothing from our country. And I came to the conclusion that I actually had to think about who I was and where I was coming from, because everybody was just coming from all those different places, which was great. But that is the moment where I would say that I even considered the question of being an African and what it actually entailed. And so that's why I say that it's a longing from home, because when I then realized that I was African, I guess the question that I'm answering is more when you're talking about African diaspora, but it's all I know. So when I was there is when I realized, okay, they're asking me to tell them who I am. I am telling them, and now I'm realizing that I miss it a lot and that I'm away from it. So it was kind of a double realization in a sense. One being, okay, this is what we eat, this is what we drink, this is how we dress, this is how we dance. Mind you, I still cannot dance traditional dance, Burundian dance. But it was a very big hit where I was like, okay, now I know who I am, but I also realized that I'm not home.
Okay, can you tell me a bit more about what led you to finally return to Africa?
It's mostly that a lot of people tell me, because I left when I was 14, up to 24, 25, they say, okay, so you actually pretty much grew up there. Your life is there. Why did you ever come back? And I think that I never actually felt like I belonged there. I'm not phrasing this right. I did belong there in the sense that I was fully included in society. I did have a good job. I was going to school. I had many friends. But I never felt like I myself should be there for a longer time than required. So as soon as I finished school, I was like, I've always felt like I had to go back. And it was kind of a quiet conversation I had with myself. I never actually told anybody, apart from my mom, that I was going to come back. And when I told my friends, I think whoever knew me told me, yes, we kind of knew you. You never really, it shows that you never really felt like you were home. Which is interesting because I guess from 14 to 24, they're kind of supposed to be very important years in your life where you find home, where you make friends, and you kind of feel like this is where you're supposed to be. But from the moment I set foot away from the continent, that I got there, and I don't remember feeling any kind of feeling apart from the fact that I was going to go back eventually. And I guess what led to my decision was that it was always my decision, even 10 years ago. However, my thought at the time in 2009 was that I would be going back to Burundi. So 2015 starts, begins in Burundi, and they've been having they've been having political instability ever since 2015. And so comes 2018, the time for me to finally come home, and home is not going to be Burundi. Home has to be Rwanda at that point. Um, so it was kind of painful in the sense that I had this whole idea in my head of being home, coming back to the streets that I grew up in. Um, but then I got here and it was different, but it was really good. I really wouldn't have it any other way. Um, but when I thought of home, my whole life, around 6 or 7 years in, I realized that things were not going well. But it was kind of a dream that was kind of being shattered. But at the same time, I realized that Africa was it. It didn't really have to be Burundi. I had set that in my mind because I guess I was a kid and I missed home, and it was initially home. However, um, just being on the continent was great, and I realized that I didn't need to limit myself, and I had to open up my eyes to the fact that I guess I'm answering the first question of being an African. Being an African, being Burundian meant being African. Being African was just so broad and so beautiful. Um, so I have been here now for a year.
Do you have plans to ever leave Rwanda or Africa as a whole? And do you plan to go back to Canada or do you want to stay? What would influence your decision?
I'm going to sound extreme, but I would rather starve than go back to, to Canada. I'm exaggerating, but what I'm trying to say is that I'm really happy here. Um, One of the reasons why I also left was that the lifestyle didn't make any sense. The North American or American or even European lifestyle didn't make any sense. I didn't see myself working a 9 to 5 with practically no contact with the people that I love, coming back home for 1 month at it every 2 years to just go back feeling even more empty. And a lot of it probably has to do with the fact that I'm an artist, I'm a writer, and I'm a singer. And I guess I felt like I needed to live my art and not be limited to a life in an office. So I don't have any plans to leave unless life forces me to. I do hope that I can be here. What influences that decision is that life is still, an adult life is still an adult life. You still need to get a job, you still need to work. But I feel like here there's room for me to actually live my art. within its limitations. Obviously, things are not perfect wherever you go, but I feel like there's room for me to be me and not feel at the end feel like I've lived my life just abiding by certain rules and being a perfect citizen, but mostly just being one piece of a big puzzle um, that doesn't really contribute to anybody's well-being, but the big person on the top. Um, so I think that's it for me. I'm in a good place in this country in Rwanda. I do hope I don't leave. I don't know what's ahead for me, but either way, just being back is an amazing experience, and I wouldn't do it any other way. And it just feels like I'm exactly where I should be at this very particular moment.
That's it for today. If you enjoyed the show, please share it and feel free to post a review. And of course, remember to subscribe. I do hope you can join us for the next episode of the Returnee Report.